Welcome back, students. Happy New Year 2025 to all of you. Hope you are doing well. Today I am back with another very important part of ecology, that is a niche with niche overlap, character displacement and etc. So I hope you listen very carefully to this lecture. This is very much important for those who are preparing for CSIR NET Life Science, UPSC students and those who are in bachelor's degree or in master's degree. So welcome to Priya's Life Science Academy. This is your educator Priya. So let's start. So first of all, we will understand what is niche width. Previous lecture we have understood what is niche, what is habitat, what is realized niche, what is fundamental niche. So in today's lecture we will understand that what is niche width. The concept of niche width or niche breadth actually refers essentially to the diversity of resource use shown by any one organism or group of organisms. So how much diverse type of food the organisms consume, that's known as niche width. For example, if I give an example, we Indians eat rice, dal, roti, sabzi, etc. Okay, that is our niche width. In foreign countries, people mostly are dependent on bread items. If I give an example of European culture, they are mostly dependent on bread, chicken, mushroom, these things. So, type of food we eat or the diversity of resource we utilize, that actually refers our niche width or niche breadth. Now coming to a very important point, that is there are two types of characteristics you can see in the species. Okay, that is that the species which are dependent on a special type of food, like which will only consume a special type of food, not the other kinds of food, are known as specialist species. And the species who consume a lot of variety kinds of foods, there's no fixed food which they will consume, so that species is known as generalist species. So specialist species have narrow niches and generalist species have broad niches. Why? From the picture you can understand that in the y-axis here is performance and in the x-axis there is resource, like the type of resource and the amount of and the diversity of resource. Here you can see that specialist species have a choice. They will only consume a certain type of food. Okay, but here you can see the generalist species can consume on a lot of variety kinds of food. That's why the graph is kind of broad. But here it is bell-shaped curve for the specialist species, as because they consume only a special kinds of food, but generalist species consume a lot of variety kinds of food. Okay, so point to be noted here, you have to remember that specialist species have narrow niches. Okay, specialist species, they have very narrow niches, but the generalist species have broad niches. Okay, here from you can see the generalist species have broad niches, but the specialist species have very narrow niches. Okay, so what is the significance of this? I may tell you that you can see that in your house there are some there are some family members who only consume on meat or fish. Okay, or if there is no meat or fish prepared in the house, they say that they will not eat for the day. But there are some family members in the house who will consume anything, like they will not depend on what type of cook is prepared in the home, like whether there is some veggies or chicken or mutton or fish, they will consume anything. So it's an advantage for them, because if there is no meat or fish cooked in the house, the person who depends on only the fish and meat, he or she will not eat for the day, and that is why he or she will be starved for the day, and that's not good. Okay, but for generalist species, what will happen? They can eat anything means edible things, so they will not be starved. So the generalist species have an advantage that they will not be starved any day, but the specialist species may have a chance for starvation for a day Okay, why? Because they have a specific choice. They will not go beyond their choice. Okay, they will stick to their choice. That is why in nature what we see, the species which are specialist, they have a much pressure. Okay, they have a much pressure of extinction, but the generalist species can depend on any kind of food, so there will be no pressure of extinction. Okay, so nature also selects the generalist species more often than specialist species, as because generalist species can have food and they can survive, but specialist species cannot survive when not given the specific types of food. Generalism is very better than specialist, so as because you can rely on lot more other types of food. Okay, so that is niche width, and that is the concept of specialist and generalist. Now coming to the next concept, which is niche overlap. Now there is a very much interesting point that overlap means what? Like for a very important, for a very simple example about what I can give you, for example, that you and your sister both loves chicken and your mother prefers chicken for the dinner, but both of you want the leg piece of the chicken, but there is only one leg piece and there are other lot of pieces of the chicken. But as you and your sister both loves that piece, so what will happen? There will be a fight between you, and that's called the overlap. Like your and your sister preferences are same. That's overlap. So there's a war, there's a competition. Either you will eat or she will eat. That's a condition. Or what may happen, you both can coexist there by the tolerance, like you can share your food with your sister, but that's a second condition. But that's not generally happens. Competition happens, and as a result, resource gets partitioned. So I'll come to this point. So here in the picture, what you can see, that there are 4 types of overlap. What is coexistence? Here it is known as coexistence, that I told, that you and your sister can share the meal, can share the leg piece. So that is known as coexistence. You can see that both the graphs are coexisted with each other. Number 1. And now the second one is included overlap, where the niche of one species is entirely contained within the niche of the other species. Okay, and the first species can use all the niche of the second species plus more. That is known as the included overlap. So I am talking here about the 2 different species. Okay, the competition is between 2 different species. Now reciprocal overlap, where when the 2 species share some of their niches, here they have that shared niche, they share some of their niches, but also have their exclusive niche. This is exclusive for this species and this is exclusive for the second species. Okay, so reciprocal overlap is when 2 species have some overlap and some exclusive species for both of them, which is known as reciprocal overlap. Okay, now what is then asymmetric overlap? Here, when one species overlaps with the niche of the other species, here you can see this species overlap with the niche of this species. Okay, but you can see this species doesn't overlap much more on this species. So the overlap is not mutual. Why? Because this species is much more dependent on this shared resource, but the species 2 is not much more dependent on the species 1's resource. So this is known as asymmetric overlap. Here one species depends more on the other species, that is on the shared resource, but that is why the overlap is not mutual. Here in the reciprocal overlap, the overlap was mutual. Okay, this was equal. These species also have some shared resource, this species have some shared resource, and they both have a common resource, equal amount of common resource. But here the common resource is not same. This species is using much of the shared resource from this species, and this species is not having much of this resource of the first species. So that is known as asymmetric overlap. So coexistence means both species can coexist naturally, can coexist finely. Included is that one species niche is entirely contained within the other species niche. Reciprocal niche is that both species have some shared resource or common resource and have some exclusive resource that both of them do not interfere with each other. And asymmetric overlap is that they both have a common resource, but the common resource is not mutual for both of the species. So one species is utilizing much of the resource of the second species, but the second species is not doing so. So that is known as asymmetric overlap. So this is the 4 types of overlap. And these asymmetric overlap often give rise to interspecific competition. Okay. Now, 2 types of non-overlap. We studied 4 types of overlap. Now 2 types of non-overlap. Here, overlapping, abutting. Abutting means adjusting, means adjacent niches. Here 2 species have, species 1 and species 2, both have adjacent niches, like their niche or ecological role are contiguous, but they do not overlap. Okay, that is known as non-overlapping or abutting niche. For example, that one species may dominate in one temperature range and other species may dominate in the higher or lower temperature range. That's different from the species number 1. And number 2 is non-overlapping disjunct. Here you can see there is no overlap of the niche. Non-overlapping disjunct, you can see 2 species, they completely occupy 2 different niches and there is a gap. There is a gap between their niches. That means their ecological role, their niche are completely different from each other. There is no overlap of the niche and there is no direct interaction or shared resource between them. That is known as non-overlapping disjunct. I hope you understand the types of overlap and non-overlap. The degree and type of niche overlap can be used to assess interspecific competition. So I told you the type of overlap may give rise to the competition between 2 species. If niches overlap and resources are limiting, then competition is currently occurring. Okay, that's a very, very important point. When niche overlap, there must be a competition, and when resources are limiting, for example, if I give you the previous example which I give you, that there was only one chicken leg piece. That's why the competition was very much higher, because resource was limiting. But if mother prepares 2 chicken leg piece, both of you have common liking, both of you have that shared resource, but you are not overlapping with each other because there is no limiting of resource. There will be competition, but the competition is not much more higher, because your mother will say that no more competition, no more worries, there are 2 leg pieces, so there will be coexistence. Okay, like the first one, like both of the species have the shared resource, both of the species like the same amount, same kind of food, as because there is no limiting resources, the resource is abundant, that's why they can coexist. Okay, so if niches overlap and resources are limiting, then competition currently occurring, competition will be there. Now number 2, abutting niches are an indication that competition may have led to niche divergence in the past. Okay, because these 2 non-overlapping niche, that means like 2 species may have competed in the past, and as a result their niche is diverged, their niche divergence has taken place, and that's why both of the species have separated. One is abutting adjacent niche and one is disjunct, like there is a gap between them. So maybe in the near past their niches were overlapped and there was competition and may have led to niche divergence. Okay, so I hope you understood what is niche overlap and the kinds of niche overlap and the non-overlap. Okay, now here you can see when overlapping niches, there will be competition. In the area of overlapping niches, organisms must compete for resources. Here you can see these are 2, orange lichen, green lichen. Here they are overlapped with each other, and that's why there is a war, there is a interspecific war. Now here is a very, very important example of niche overlap and the result, that is known as competitive exclusion. Gauss has given us these results, and we nowadays we we call it as Gauss's principle of competitive exclusion or Gauss's law of competitive exclusion. It is very important. Please write it down in your copy that this part is so important for all of the competitive exams. According to Gauss, it is acknowledged that two species, when have same ecological niche, they cannot live together in the same ecological system. And this is the principle of reciprocal exclusion, which is linked to competition. Okay, in 1934, Russian microbiologist Georgy Gauss tried to test the competition between the three species of protist, that is Paramecium aurelia, Paramecium bursaria and Paramecium cordatum. He wanted to know the effect of competition between these three species. Okay, so he cultured them in the medium. What he found that when three of the species were cultured in a separate medium, their growth is very much normal. They showed logistic growth curve. Logistic growth pattern can be seen for each species when they are grown alone. This is Paramecium aurelia, this is Paramecium bursaria, and this is Paramecium cordatum. But what he see, this is experiment number 1, this graph, and this graph is experiment number 2. When he cultured together Paramecium aurelia and Paramecium cordatum, what he saw? He saw that Paramecium cordatum got extinct and Paramecium aurelia can grow much stronger than Paramecium cordatum. But the growth was much more lesser when grown alone. When Paramecium aurelia grown alone, the growth was much more higher, but when grown with cordatum, its growth is reduced. That means there is a kind of competition between aurelia and cordatum, and they both rely on the same kind of food. He gave bacteria and yeast for this protist. So Paramecium aurelia and cordatum both rely on bacteria for the food. That is why there is a competition, and for this competition Paramecium cordatum got extinct. Here you can see when Paramecium cordatum grown alone, its growth was so good, but when grown with Paramecium aurelia, its growth got reduced and it got extinct. So from this, what we can devise that as because these two protists rely on same type of food, they both can't coexist together. Okay, when resources are similar, the two species can't coexist. That is why it is known as competitive exclusion. One species, that is Paramecium cordatum, got extinct, which is known as competitive exclusion. Okay, so from this what we can devise that two species can't coexist together when the resources are similar. Now number 2 experiment. Here when Paramecium cordatum was co-cultured with Paramecium bursaria, what we can see that both species can coexist together. So from which what we can see, as because but their growth was not so higher when they are grown alone. When Paramecium bursaria grown alone, its growth was very much higher, but when grown with cordatum, growth is lower. And the same as the case for cordatum, when grown alone, growth is much higher, and when grown with bursaria, growth is lower. But at least they can coexist. Why they can coexist? Because their food preferences are not same. Paramecium cordatum rely on bacteria and Paramecium bursaria, they rely on algae. Okay, because Gauss, when in tube, he gave two kinds of food for this protist, bacteria and yeast. Paramecium aurelia and cordatum, they feed on bacteria, and Paramecium bursaria, it feeds on algae. That is why, as because Paramecium cordatum rely on bacteria and Paramecium cordatum rely on algae, that is they can coexist, but both can eat both can rely on both. Okay, these three protists can rely on anything, bacteria and algae both, but their main preferences, Paramecium aurelia and Paramecium cordatum's main preferences were bacteria. Okay, aurelia and cordatum, their much preferred item is bacteria. That is why there was much higher kind of competition. That is why cordatum got extinct. But for case of Paramecium cordatum and Paramecium Berseria like more of algae than bacteria. That is why they can at least they can survive in a coexistence relationship. They can survive and they can coexist. Okay, but both can have bacteria and algae both. But Paramecium cordatum loves bacteria more and Berseria loves algae more. That's why they can coexist. So for the similar example, like you and your sister both loves chicken, but your sister likes the leg piece and you like the other pieces of chicken, not the leg piece. So you both rely on the same kind of food, but the variety, there is a variety of your choice. So that's why you both can coexist together, you both can eat that. That's the case for Paramecium cordatum and Paramecium Berseria. From this, what it is concluded that species with exactly the same requirements cannot live together. Aurelia and cordatum, Aurelia, A for Aurelia and C for cordatum, they were truly dependent on bacteria. So species with exactly the same requirements cannot live together in the same place. Okay, they are known as complete competitors. So that is why the rule came, competitive exclusion. Competitive exclusion, this term was given by Garrett in 1960. Okay, so the complete competitors can't coexist, but if the species can rely on other kind of food, they can coexist. And because of this competition, the resources is partitioned. Now the next chapter will be resource partitioning, because whenever there is competition, this one species got extinct, but we don't need extinction. That's why the species is very clever. The species, they partition their niche. To avoid competition, they will partition their niche, okay, maybe of different size, which permits them to utilize differential niches. Okay, I hope you understood Gauss's law of competitive exclusion. Okay, if any questions is there, you can ask me in the comment box. I'll be very happy to help you out. Just for your summary, you have to understand that two species which share the complete same kind of resource, they can't coexist. There will be competitive exclusion, but you have to avoid that competitive exclusion. One species can't be extincted. Okay, so to avoid competitive exclusion, there will be resource partitioning, which we will discuss in the next class. I hope you understood, students, and I always say, fight for your dreams will fight for you. Thank you.